Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is SOULScast number 4. I am joined by a series regular, Rhel,
Hello.
and by request, my fourth favourite British male member of the Souls FC, TwoBear.
Hello.
I expected a bit more than that after I was...
Oh, sorry. Hi, everybody.
There we go. Right, so this is SOULScast number 4. What do you think of Dawntrail? It's been out for a week and a half now, almost 2 weeks, something like that. Feels like it's been out forever, considering I've spent most of my time in EX1 and 2. But anyway, we're just going to start off. We're going to jump straight in to what do you think about the story of Dawntrail. First off, I'm going to throw it to Rhel. Just a quick summary, and then we can dig deeper.
I liked it. I like the shift in certain dynamics and the tone of the story compared to what we've had before. But it is a reset, so
yeah. No, fair enough. Succinct. And you, TwoBear, what did you think?
I thought the opposite. I found it pretty boring, and takes a really long time to get going, and then has some interesting ideas once it does, but then doesn't really explore them very well, and that's all sort of crammed into the last third of the game. So by that point, I was kind of bored anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much the opposite, I guess.
Which is what we love here, especially in the Souls FC. We love arguments. Not me though.
Yeah, we love a good old fight. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, you usually are the argument.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. But yeah, I was pretty.
No, that was Stormblood.
Pretty negative about it.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll dive straight into particulars now that we have some good summaries. I'm more interested in what TwoBear has to say, because I think most of us are on the kind of, we liked Dawntrail. We enjoyed what it did for the most part, although I think it's kind of undeniable there are some really rough bits in there. But like, what would you say was probably your least favorite thing about Dawntrail, Bear? If you had to pick like a moment, or a fight, or a story beat, or a piece of VA, or
I like, mine is a really general thing.
Okay.
Which is that, like, I felt as though my agency as a player was so low that at times I felt like I was kind of being disrespected by it. Like, my time was being disrespected.
Okay.
Like, quests where, the thing like, oh, this could have been an email. And there was so much of it that was like, this could have been a cutscene. Like, the quests where you leave town and then click on a sparkle on the ground and watch a bar fill up 3 times and then run back to town. I was just like, it literally could have been a 15-second cutscene. Like, the notion of my interaction with this plot line is so thin, it's so minimal, that like my character kind of just didn't need to be there. And and like, I didn't mind the fact that the plot wasn't about me. Like, I was fine to kind of take a backseat in the adventure, but I just kind of felt like, I wanted more. I wanted some kind of sense of the game, like respecting that I'm a human person sitting here waiting to do something.
Right.
Which I didn't get from watching, hours and hours and hours of cutscenes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, I thought that the story that it was telling in what I thought was quite a boring way was in itself often quite boring. So that also didn't help. Like, if it had been an absolute banger of a story, then I probably would have been okay with it. But I think it was the combination of the fact that like I thought the plot, at least again, I think it picks up towards the end, but
Yeah, for
like
sure.
a long stretch of this felt like not very interesting and told in a not very interesting way.
Okay.
And I think as well, like this is something that was kind of already there in Endwalker, but like not to this degree. Not to the there are lots of bits in Endwalker where you're like the Zodiac thing. I think it's Zodiac where you go from killing Zodiac halfway through the game. You're like, oh shit, like didn't expect this to happen, and then you spend like 3 hours talking to rabbits about how they failed to grow anything but carrots for 4 years, and it's just like the pacing is wrong. I don't care about the rabbits. And then it happens again later, I think, where you come back from Elpis and then you have to spend like 3 hours walking around in the underground bit that I can't remember the name of.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just like, I don't care about any of this stuff. Like,
Okay.
this could have been a side quest.
Okay. Let
yeah.
me ask you to just pick one thing then. What would you have changed about the story to give you more player agency?
Gosh. I mean, so like I was thinking about this, and like I would have kind of structurally changed the first half of the game so
Oh
that
wow.
like
Okay.
Wook Lamat is doing the trials, and she has her own entourage that isn't just us and the twins.
Mhm.
And we go off and do trial, and then we go off and do other stuff, and then our paths converge at various points, and we meet up and like see key moments, maybe help when she gets kidnapped, that kind of thing.
Mm.
Like I think it would have been more interesting for me to have if we'd have had these kind of two different plots going on essentially at the beginning of the game, where you sort of see the key moments of the trials, but don't have to walk
Yeah.
around after Book Lamat while she trades a bag of peas for a
Yeah.
magic mirror or whatever for 3 hours
Yeah,
or
I get
whatever
you.
that quest took. Like yeah, I think that I feel like there was a way, because I replayed the beginning of Heaven's Ward recently, and
Okay.
like at the beginning of Heaven's Ward, I was just call him Alfonso, Alfino.
Yeah.
You arrive in Heaven's Ward, and then Alfino goes off to do a bunch of stuff, and he's like, he goes.
Yeah.
Alfino exits stage left to do a bunch of stuff which is going to become relevant in the plot later, and then we go off and help um thingy, I've forgotten his name, the father of the household's dipshit twin brothers for a while. And
Yeah.
it's not that like that stuff is not kind of like super meaningful. It's not like world changing stuff, but it feels like we have a role to play. We're doing something. We like you literally do stuff. Like there's two
Yeah.
duties at the beginning there, right?
Okay. Then
One for each other.
let me ask you a follow up to that. Then I'll move on to you, Rhel. Obviously, in Dawntrail, we are seen to be more of a mentor to Lamartine. So we are there in a mentor capacity. We're there to kind of oversee and support, and then when shit really hits the fan, we have to jump in. Do you think we would have had that same kind of story if Lamat was off doing trials on her own, or not on her own, but with the twins, maybe Kryl, maybe bring Estinian in a little bit earlier? Do you think that aspect of the story would have had the same impact if it was done differently, or done your way, or do you think it would have been a little bit less of an emphasis of us being a more mentor to her?
I mean, I kind of didn't feel like I was mentoring her anyway. Like I kind of felt as though, um, I was there as the emotional support player more than
Right.
like telling her anything. And I like, in a sense, I almost think you can't really act like a mentor in a game where you have no agency in the plot, right? Which is just how the game works. That's not a kind of criticism of the game, like, make it into Baldur's Gate 3, let me do whatever I want. I'm
Mm.
fine for it to want to tell a plot and me have no agency. But I found like I personally didn't really feel like I was mentoring her much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think you could retain that. I mean, I'm, obviously a big disclaimer. I'm not a writer. Um,
What?
but I think, like when she gets kidnapped, for instance, and you go and have to go rescue her. Like you could retain moments like that, right? Where like big bro has to or big sister has to go and help her by just by, oh, my link pearl's ringing, ring ring. Oh, it's Alfino or or Kryl or Estinian or whoever. We've got a situation here. Can you come to such and such and meet us, right?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I mean, I maybe you couldn't retain it in exactly the same way, but I feel like for me, I didn't get that experience necessarily anyway. So,
Okay.
um,
That's fair
yeah.
enough. Fair. And now, what about you, Rhel?
What about me? Yeah,
Tell me
well,
everything.
everything. Well, like you mentioned, the whole mentoring part, I did get that.
Mm.
Mostly in the ways like we were, at least the way I felt it, we were relied upon for advice when she was kind of asking us, or we got in a comment when she was having a problem, or weighing different courses of actions, and then we got in like, well, are you sure this is the right kind of way, or have you maybe considered doing like this?
Mm-hmm.
So there were small moments like that where our input was kind of there to nudge this, really a fledgling warrior who's battling for a throne she's way not ready for, but she kind of feels like she has to go for because of her brother being a horrible alternative.
Yeah.
Both of the brothers, as much as she loves them, being horrible alternatives. So we're kind of there. I think it was. It was. I think in the end, the whole kind of scions, or well, it was us and the twins and Kryl really who were there, kind of shoving her this way and that.
Mm.
But I did get the sort of sense that, as opposed to us being the newbie adventurer, which we spent the last 10 years kind of growing from a newbie adventurer to the savior of the planet, we were now allowed to use that experience in a new setting, being a sort of a guide and like Bear said, an emotional support animal, depending on your character, but also a mentor to kind of nudge and challenge,
Mhm.
like gently challenge our ward, so to speak, to kind of rethink some of her stances and guide her gently towards where she needs to be. And I found that an interesting change. It at least for me, it brought a sense of a maturity to the character and a measure of age, maybe,
Mhm.
because passing of time isn't really all that clear. But at
No,
least for
not
me, it
particularly.
made sense. Like the game goes, you've been to places and you've done this for a long time, so now it's your time to kind of pass that on to other people, or to this particular person, at least to
Yeah.
Wuklamar.
I think I'm more with you on this one, Rel, where there are, like, obviously, as Bear said, you are a kind of voiceless, well, not kind of, you are a voiceless protagonist, and there are very few instances where you get a dialogue option. And while they don't really seem to change anything, it's nice to have something there to indicate that we are giving our input to this character who is essentially our pupil, our student, along with when she interacts with the twins and Cryle, and then later on in the story with Graha and Stola and all that kind of stuff. No, go for it.
And it wasn't just our choices, but at every odd moment, after Wuklamat had done her choices, or sort of depending on whatever she decided to do after asking for us for advice, the camera would zoom in on us. Like, those were the moments that first kind of made me notice the shift, is that it was kind of like the camera was asking us for our reaction, or our character for their reaction of what Wuklamat has just chosen to do, or how to approach things. Like, it was like they kind of left her to talk outside of the screen and just zoomed in on our face, and we would either smile, or I don't know if it changes, but depending on what you sort of choose to react to her questions.
Yeah.
But it was like checking out our approval for her actions. That's when I was like, oh, it's we're kind of here in a guiding mission. And going back to your question to Bear about what he would have changed, I think had they changed that, had we gone off on our own, they would have had to written an entirely different story for the first half, because they would have had to invent a entirely new reason for us to be in here in the first place, because we don't really have any other reason to be on the new continent. So there would have been another entirely new plot line that they would have had to seed in to draw us here in the first place, and Wuklamat would have just been an accident that we kind of bump into. So
that could have been fun.
It would have been an entirely different first half with an entirely different story, which I think at this point of the new saga is probably not something they could have done, I think, properly, without having set up something way earlier.
Yeah.
Because we don't have those plot lines yet, or those plot threads yet to draw from, unless they go back to the previous story and start pulling from there something that ties up to the now supposedly closed arc.
Which I think isn't completely unreasonable, though, because there are things from Realm Reborn that get brought up in these other expansions all the time. Like, I remember when Shadowbringers came out, Yoshi basically said, do the Circus Tower raid, and then Graha will have a different dialogue option for you when you defeat Innocence, right? So stuff like that will always tie in later on, and I think it isn't too much out of the realm of possibility that they could have pulled something from it. But I think, like you say, it is a completely new arc, completely new story, completely new characters. Taking something from the Hydaelyn Zodiac arc would have been cool, but I think potentially seen as a little bit lazy as well, because you are building this entire new sphere of characters, areas, enemies, all these things. So, you know, I can definitely see, I don't want to sound Fence City, but it definitely is. I can absolutely see both points of view. So let me ask you opposite questions then. I'll start with you, Rhel. What is the thing that you didn't like the most about the expansion?
What I didn't like most about...
Yeah, something that you would want to change completely, get rid of. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if I wanted to change or completely, because I do recognize that this is being, like, the story is being written by a Japanese company.
Yeah.
But I think at times, at least for my taste, they went a bit too anime with the humor. For example, the Wook Ewu, or whatever his name is.
Wook. I really like that NPC.
Yeah. The guy who was like, what, the moment he did the oh, I'm sorry, please cut off my head for being impolite to you, and then Wuklama going, just shut the fuck up, I don't care, and he's immediately like, it's just fine, it's forgotten. I was like, like that was one of the first moments I'm like, okay, that was so anime. I didn't like it.
Okay,
Like,
interesting.
please don't make this a running gag, and then it becomes a running gag, and I was like, okay, here it comes, okay, because it becomes so predictable. I was like, that's a bit too anime for me. But recognizing where the game comes from, I'm like, I can forgive that because
Mhm.
it is probably cultural storytelling in a way
Okay.
that
Yeah,
we
yeah, I
we
get you.
just can't fault. Really, it's like Eastern gamers going, we don't like these story tropes because the game comes from the West or something, and then I don't know, Blizzard changes their storytelling to fit more anime humor. You
Right,
can't
yeah.
please
That's
anyone
fine, I
because
think.
humor is subjective.
Well, yeah, exactly.
What? Yeah, and another one that was kind of way overdone was the peace and happiness for all, especially since we just come from an expansion where several planets died because they wanted peace and happiness for all.
Yeah.
So that was like, as someone, as a character who has literally seen or experienced the echoes of several like apocalypses in the end of the universe, we've seen what happens when you try to eradicate discomfort and just try to make everyone happy and permanent peace. Even Elpis was stagnating, or well, the world of the ancients was stagnating because they just shoved out everything that was an obstacle to peace and happiness. I kind of wish they would have gone with, there has to be struggle. You can't make peace and happiness for everyone.
Well, there has to be that balance
Which,
between light and dark, right? Otherwise,
yeah, there has to be like
yeah.
a bit more of the maybe be earlier start with the there has to be suffering. Like, you can't eradicate suffering. You can't make a super peaceful nation for eternity.
Yeah.
And I wish they would have brought that in way before Sphene, because I think that lesson was kind of hammered out into Buklamat right at the end of the story with Sphene, where she's like, okay, there are just some people you can't shake hands with. You can't hug into submission, basically. And even then, even after that, I think she was still kind of, well, peace and happiness for your people now that you're dead. So it was kind of like, you still didn't learn the lesson, did you? Like, don't worry, you'll die. We'll get rid of you, and then we'll take care of your people and make them happy. And it's like, you're really not getting the point, are you? Like, tone
Yeah.
down with that a little bit.
I think the naivete of Wuklama rubbed a few people the wrong way, especially since we've gone through so much in our own continent where everybody has learned these lessons already, and then it feels like you're kind of making it happen again so that somebody seems to have an arc, but it's such a, this is not my words, but it's such a lazy arc because it's so easy to do. You know, somebody who's bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, they think the world could be sunshine and rainbows, and then they go on a journey and they realize people aren't all that great, and there are other people who want to genocide you, and yeah, it's
well, that's not
use that as a verb.
yeah.
well, that's not exactly what my problem was. That she didn't seem to take the lesson to heart, even at the end. Is that she stuck to, like, she had a growth arc. I don't mind there being an arc like that. That was fine, because that was kind of what set her apart from her two brothers. One was like, no, we totally need to, like, fuck culture. I don't like it because it led to my abandonment, and we just need Charlie and innovations. And the other one was like, well, I'll just make everyone equal and traumatize them with war. And she's like, no, let's just keep things as they are. But that she kept going, like, they overused the peace and happiness for her so much that it was getting old. And then even at the end, she didn't kind of get the message. But I guess, yeah, it's a new arc, and you can't have a character fully baked at the end of it. I'm so happy they ditched her I'm a strong woman leader. I don't fear anything or get seasick. No, what the fuck are you talking about thing? Because by the time we got to the upper levels of the Hanu Hanu zone, I was getting tired of that. I was like, this is another anime protagonist trope that I'm getting so tired of in this expansion really fast. And luckily they had the talk and she's like, okay, I don't have to be strong alone. I can rely on my friends. I can be weak and vulnerable and still be strong at the end of the day and do what I need to do.
I think on the friends point specifically, there were a lot of people complaining about the whole friendship ex machina type of thing, and then I saw like a response to that saying, if that's what you really don't like about stories, then Final Fantasy is not the franchise for you, because most of the stories, while having like an extra MacGuffin or something, relies upon this party of people coming together and facing a threat. Like, to me, that isn't even a point of contention. That's just what Final Fantasy is and has always been about.
It's like, where have we been in the last 10 years at least?
I know, right?
I didn't.
Bear, I'm about to come to you, so hold on.
No, I was gonna say something about the
Okay.
friends and
Okay,
peace and happiness thing. I didn't mind the peace and happiness thing per se, but I felt like, and maybe this is a similar thing to Rhel. I felt that the story didn't do a good job of ever challenging her to reflect on these like simplistic naive values.
Mhm.
Like every single thing that she meets, except Sphene, but then weirdly she tries to like hug Sphene to death anyway, is that every single time she encounters any kind of difficulty, she just kind of peace and happiness is her way out of it. So it kind of didn't feel like she was ever forced to reflect on these values, which I felt was a bit unsatisfying as well.
Yeah, I can see
And
that.
we have the post expansion patches where something's going to go wrong. We're going to get back on the roller coaster of, I don't know, betrayal or another war, totally not a War of Alamigo thing, where I think she might be forced to really going to test her ideals of, well, we can't rule with peace, and probably kind of lend credence to Zoralja's, no, we need to be militaristically strong as well, because there are threats out there. And we are kind of alone in this. It's probably going to happen with the key or something. I think this entire story arc is going to be about extra dimensional threats, because now we have a way to open the barriers Heidelin set up once we figure out how to use it, or someone steals it and figures out how to use it. So
yeah, for sure. Right, Bear, I'm going to ask you basically the opposite of what I asked Rhel, because you generally didn't like it, but what was your favorite thing about the expansion?
Just the plot, just the MSQ, or like
No, anything. The anything in the plot, a fight, an area, piece of music, character, anything.
I thought in general, like all of the kind of, I'm scare quoting with my fingers. You can't see, game part of it was great.
Yeah.
Dungeons were good. Trials were great. The areas look gorgeous. The music's great. All of that stuff was really good. In terms of like specifically MSQ stuff, I think this kind of ties in to what I was saying about feeling as though I was totally irrelevant to the point that it was making. The bits that I enjoyed were I liked being summoned by the king and having to fight the king. Partly just because it's fun when the player character glazes you and tells you you're a badass. But also partly because it was the first point in the plot that I had felt like spoken to as the player character by anybody in it in like a meaningful way.
Yeah.
And then later on when you go to Shaluani, I think it's called Shaluani.
Yeah.
cowboy place.
I enjoyed that section as well. I think because it wasn't, acting as the emotional support character, you actually had more agency. You were up front. You were doing stuff a bit more. You know, and cowboy stuff is cool. So that also helped. But yeah, no, I thought, you know, as much as I didn't enjoy playing through the MSQ, I thought in general, the zones, dungeons, everything were fun. Like I really enjoyed the fights.
Okay.
Really like the new graphics as well. I think my character came out really good. I think he had a real glow up, so I'm very happy about that.
I very much agree with you on the graphics thing.
Yeah, and like I think, you know, I've been lucky in the sense that I don't think my character looks that different. I think it just looks better. I know some people have been upset with how their character looks with the new graphics.
Or not noticing it at all, but we won't talk
Some
about
of
that.
those people I haven't seen the graphics and struggled to recognize the differences,
Yep.
but yeah, so yeah, all, you know, everything else about it, but like, you know, they know what they're doing at this point, right? Like, you know, that all that stuff is like solid in a sense. Like, I guess writing the story is always the risky part of it, because
Yeah.
Also,
the
they have
worst
new
you could say
writers.
is that it's the same formula as the other expansions, but you know,
Yeah.
it kind of works. Like,
Yeah.
Also, they did bring in if I can jump in, yeah, they did bring in new writers for this expansion, which I believe have done shorter quest lines up until now. So it could also be that you got two. I'm not sure what their writing history is, but for this game, it's like one of them did the Four Lords, which was the Stormblood trial series, and the other one did the Shadowbringers trial series. And then you go, here's an expansion, write it. Oh, by the way, you're starting from fresh, so make a fresh story that starts setting up new plot lines with a character that's already super powerful and super known, but you kind of have to tone all of that back.
Yeah.
So yeah, that might also be influence the way the first part came out. Like,
Potentially, yeah. But I mean,
yeah.
I think I said this to you, Rel. Maybe it was you and Jen. We have to expect more now, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like we've had the new expansion with new writers, the beach episode that turns into the end of the world episode. We've done that now, and now we have to have patches for the next year and 10 months until the next expansion.
Yeah.
So what is the story going to be? And while it isn't our favorite main scenario writer from Shadowbringers, like I said before, we have faith. Well, we have faith in the writing team, and we have faith in the people that oversee the MSQ writers to deliver something epic. Because even in Stormblood, the generally most disliked expansion, it was still a decently good story, had some really high highs, some great set pieces, some cool characters like Hien, Gosetsu, Yugiri. So yeah, like I say, we have to expect more, and they probably will deliver.
Oh, absolutely. Now the set pieces have been set, the cultures have been established, the lore has been dumped on us for all zones and the peoples. This, like, they have now built the stage, and now they have to start performing.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think though that, like, I mean, I can see where there are plot hooks in what they've built, you know, like you said with the key and things like that. But like, do you think that the MSQ stuff is we're gonna go up with those with the Final Fantasy X dudes that live in the mountains? Because I this is part of my
Oh, the
this is part of the
giants?
issue, I guess, with the first half of the game, is that like I can't even see how any of it's going to be relevant going forward. Like, you know, when the Albed characters, you know, that do all the trading, like they might appear, you know, as characters, but like I can't really see how they're going to be relevant. Not relevant. That's the wrong way to put it. Like, I can't see how they're plot hooks, right? Like,
I don't think that is necessarily one of them. I think, and just to throw my 2 cents in where I would potentially like it to go, is now that we have this key, that seemingly opens a portal to one reflection that kind of opens the door to a story where more of these keys exist and more reflections are opened up to us within the course of these patches. So that as kind of a starting point would be really cool to see, because even though Yoshi wants the game to go on for at least another 10 years, I think establishing more reflections now and then just giving us little bits and pieces of them to then eventually expand on them in another expansion or in later patches would be really, really cool, because we don't really know what goes on in the rest of these reflections. There are versions of us on these reflections, but we don't know what they're up to. We don't know how the world is. We don't know if it's flooded with darkness or light, or if it's kind of stable right now, if there's a war going on, if it's too peaceful. Like, nobody knows. So I think that at the moment is probably one of the games and one of the strongest threads that they could begin to explore out of anything that you could make, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that does seem like a pretty clear direction in the future. I think I specifically was thinking because Rhel had said, the law has been dumped, and like you know, some people appreciate law dumping, some people don't. I just sort of feel like, I had this law dumped on me, but I can't see how this law that got dumped on me is going to be it's going to tie into the key stuff, right? Like it seems like I had a lot of stuff dumped on me, but then it sort of ended up not really being relevant, or I struggle to see how it's relevant. Again, not a writer. Maybe
No, but
they will
you
make
don't
it
have to.
relevant
You don't
in a
have
way
to qualify that you're not
see.
a writer to have an opinion about a story.
Yeah.
No, of course. I just mean like, I don't want to be like, there's no possible way they could make any of this stuff relevant, because that would, that's obviously an absurd claim. But
I think I think for me, what I mean more is that they have now established the continent and its
sure,
peoples and the
yeah,
differences, like the cultures. They've basically spent half the expansion world building. So now they have to show us that they can use these pieces and use this stage. They spent 5 levels at least constructing for us, 5 to 7 levels. That's kind of my point, is that
yeah,
there's no room for exposition much more now. Like the whole Alexandria part, that was the actiony thing when things kicked off, and I was positively surprised to see that Graha and Ishtal have more parts in this than just being on the poster, which I was surprised that they're in there when they're not in the story. But yeah, I'm expecting them to now, because I think it's going to play the stage, at least for the post-patch things, and maybe even later on, kind of make it more than just, well, we need a new area for the expansion and then we ditch it and go somewhere else. As to how that's going to play out, I don't know. Maybe something happens with Alexandria. Maybe, like, I think Izu pointed out that there's an NPC saying that Sphyn's crown is a special regulator, and seeing as it leans quite heavily on 9, that there is someone else behind the curtains pulling the strings, like the organization that was behind the entire memory storage life after death,
And
their whole
who created
technology to
Sphene,
preservation.
the preservation organization, like, they disappeared. There was no record of them. Even the rebellion Oblivion tried to find any note of them, and from what I remember from the story, there weren't any traces of them. So my guess is that they faded away from public view and just continue to operate in the background through Sphene somehow. And now that she's gone, they're going to need to emerge, I don't know, potentially for the next expansion, be the new Asians, so to speak, because we fucked over the Sphene plan of interdimensional merge. They will have to step in and take matters into their own hands and try to initiate it on their own somehow. And that's going to cause problems for us then.
I haven't been keeping count, but are there still Asians left over?
Yes.
There's like 3.
Yeah,
Two.
there was before the expansion, people were speculating that Ultima was part of Alexandria because there are symbols that heavily resemble Ultima's symbol around Solution 9. So people were strongly speculating that we will find her somehow linked, but then Sphene was an AI instead of an Ascian.
Yeah.
So who knows? But we know that Shards had members of the sundered members of the Convocation working in the background. We know that there was a calamity, so they were trying to reunite it and potentially almost destroyed it and turn it into another void. Based on what was explained in that the entire place is engulfed with lightning.
Mm-hmm.
So
Evidence.
whether or not she still exists is another matter. Some say that I think I read somewhere that Gaius had Ultima's mask when we saw him as the Ascian hunter. But as we know, just because you kill someone unless you have white aura sight to destroy the soul,
They're not dead.
that doesn't matter much.
Yeah.
I also talking about plot hooks. I wondered if when you're in living memory and you're going around the
Murdering
Lalafell
people.
area.
Oh,
So the Lalafells there had left the southern islands, southern seas
yes.
islands, whatever they were called. And then you go into this room and you have to count the masks, right? And I was like, oh, masks. That's also related to Ascians. And then
Yeah.
they also talk about the fact that they have this speaker who apparently led them away from the islands into Alexandria through the portal.
Yeah.
But then no one knows who the speaker is. There's no body. They don't really know who she was. And then they say we don't really know what this room is. It's just we don't even know what these masks are relevant to. And then you have there's all these masks which kind of look like Ascian masks, not exactly all over the walls. So I was also a bit like, oh, Ascians again? Not in a
Well,
bad way. Like I think
yeah.
it wasn't an Alizé like better not be
Like,
Alligans again.
yeah.
And so that also I was wondering if that's going to be a plot hook going forwards.
Yeah, I thought that as well at the puzzle, but then was like, oh yeah, but they weren't exactly tiki masks, but they had if you down the aloe aloe roots, there is one boss at least that pertains with the totems. There were 4 totems with different expressions, and you have to kind of go and fiddle around with them to unlock one of the paths. So I was like, oh wait, no, it retains to their culture, and
Right, because that's in the South Sea Islands. I mean,
yes.
they could come from the same.
Well, if you have you done aloe aloe?
I haven't actually.
Okay, because you get a special line if you have done it,
Oh, okay.
and
Oh,
it's
do
like,
they literally say, "Oh, okay, from South Sea Islands"?
yeah,
Oh,
they basically like, oh, you've been there, and you're like, oh yeah, I fought the speaker statue.
Okay.
Like that's literally one of the bosses is the statue of the speaker, and then she has this massive orb that is radiating with powerful ether and does things. Because they were like, oh, these markings, they're kind of like from the Southern Isles, and then they mentioned that you've been there. I was like, yeah, sure. I beat the shit out of their speaker statue, and there was this ball that she had, and they were like, oh, cool.
So the last
Fair
4
enough.
Ascians that are alive are Halmarut, Pashtarot, Dudalophon, and Ultima.
Yeah.
Oh, and Emma Roloth, apparently.
At least the
Emma
ones
Roloff.
that we haven't personally hunted down somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And Gaia, of course, but she's no longer
Well, yeah,
in
okay.
the cult.
Yeah, exactly.
What was her Ascian name? Logrith.
I don't remember. Logrith, yeah.
Or was Logrith the boy one?
Don't remember.
I don't remember. But that's another story, another plot hook that they have waiting.
Logrith with an F, yeah.
Yeah. That's another plot hook brewing there that I think is going to tie into Endwalker post expansion patches. Because if you've done the role quests, you take the white masked boy that was Elidibus's tool to send us hunting for the Triad, the Warring Triad.
Nuclear High?
Yeah, yeah. You take him to the first because he's, if I remember right, he's a reflection of the boy that you meet in the Mage quest line. So they are now practicing how to open rifts to the 13th. Over there, then you have Gaia who's like, oh yeah, sure, I can open doors there. I can help you guys at some point. And then you have the whole Zero and Golbez thing, them doing stuff now there. We have the Crystal Tower siphoning light into the 13th now to balance things out. So I think that's going to fuck up somehow, and we're going to end up having a more 13th focused expansion at some point, Shadowbringers 2.0, maybe Lightbringers, I don't know. But I think something's going to crack. Either that connection is... yeah. Become the Grey Warrior.
Oh god.
But I think that's going to be something, and we might need the key for that. I don't know. An interesting thing about the key could be just me over speculating, but I found the cutscene peculiar when we use Azam's crystal to summon our friends to the final trial. And as our crystal shines and the invocation starts, we zoom in on the key that gets a ring with a ball in the center, which is the same symbol as on Azam's crystal before it sinks into Sphene. So that was, I think, either red herring or too much of a coincidence that they both contain the same symbol.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, Karen.
Yeah, and then the key ends up in our care, which is like, well, now we have Azam's crystals to summon people from wherever, and we have a key that allows us to travel to other places. So maybe we don't need a crystal tower for 100 years to travel to another shard next time. Maybe we're gonna have to send our poor cat boy 100 years in the past.
Sorry about that, Graha.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw that as well. I wondered if it was like, is this saying this is specifically Azam's, or is this like the convocation used it or something, right? And whoever happened to be holding it at the time, it would glow with their symbol.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, I'd seen the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I think Emmett was Azam since the Sundering, because if you remember the story, it was Emmett created Azam's crystal in secret and was carrying it kind of as a memento for his friend. And
right.
sort of, because the seat of Azam, I think, sort of ceased to exist when he defected the council or the convocation in opposition to Zodiac's creation. So I think Emmett was like, well, no, he was my friend, and we kind of have to stick to the formula, so I'm going to be Azam in secret. I don't think the key necessarily, I can't see how it would have been created in their time. Although I guess they did make pocket planes. If you just look at Cathesis Hyperborea, for example, that's an entire building filled with planes of existence, kinda.
Yeah.
Well,
So
when I was saying convocation, I meant the Asians, the Zodiac-y ones.
Right.
I guess that makes sense. Like Azam had left by that point, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it could be that I had that thought as well. Yeah, maybe Emmett imbued it with some of Azam's magic to kind of drill holes into because the whole extra dimensional merge kind of sounded like an optional rejoining, like a method of causing a rejoining is just absorb shards into one another.
Yeah, sounds very similar.
Yeah, so maybe it was intended for that, but as to why it was handed to Lalafels on a volcanic island in the middle of nowhere, I don't know. Maybe the speaker... Well, they were studying Arcanima, so maybe it was developed there, or maybe they just found it, I don't know, killed an Asian and stole it. Because it was on the source originally, so I don't know, maybe they intended to use it on the source and just absorb all the planes, but their own calamity fucked things up.
Yeah, I
fucking
mean,
shame.
I guess the timeline's kind of weird, right? Because if it was made when there were shards to travel to, then that implies that it was made when Azem had already been sundered into
Yeah.
pieces.
Yes.
So who made it?
Well, I mean, yeah, could also be that Azem had been reincarnated, because from what I've kind of understood, souls keep being reborn over and over again. So I don't think it's a wild expectation that our soul has been through the cycle several times
I mean,
as
it's not an
well.
unrealistic
You think
expectation for sure.
previous ones at some point found out they were Azem too?
Maybe not necessarily, but some memories resurface, like with Hermes.
Yeah, true.
Like every time he was reincarnated, he remembered the fractions or like fragmented memories of Elpis, and especially stuff that he tried to purge with Kairos.
Mm.
So I don't know, might be some inclinations. It sounds like our Warrior of Light is very similar to what Azem used to be, in that we travel and stick our noses into other people's business where where it doesn't belong, to save them. So I don't know, might be an invention brought up by that need to travel, and it's like, well, there's other worlds.
Well, we are the warriors of light and darkness, Rhel. That's what we do. We insert ourselves fucking everywhere.
The Zebra Warrior.
The Zebra warrior.
We meddle.
The Grey Ranger.
Yes.
So Myth in chat has posed an interesting theory. The key is definitely not convocation linked, as it reacts to emotion and has gold energy. It's probably Dynamis linked. The only one on the convocation during the final days who knew was Hermes. I don't think any of us thought about Dynamis, to be fair. We thought that was all done.
That is true.
That's all Hydaelyn and Zodiac arc stuff. But then you
does
kind of
it-
realize that Dynamis is kind of everywhere. It doesn't really matter.
Did they say it reacts to emotion?
I don't remember that. I'll be honest.
I just know
I
they were
thought-
in great peril.
I thought Sveen has to do the reason, like she goes to sleep and lets you kill all her friends, is because she has to do a load of calculations.
She has to let the
it's-
tower do it, right? Like the tower has to.
Yeah.
The server that
Which-
she's living in has to do it.
Yeah. So yeah,
I
I'm
don't know.
not sure about that specific instance. I mean,
But it is a good point. It might. I know the emotion has been linked to the at least the spellcaster role quest, but I'm not sure if it's linked to the key itself. Could be. But then again, in this timeline that we exist in currently, Hermes was not the only one who knew about Dynamis. Hydaelyn knew about Dynamis because of our meddling with the past. Hydaelyn knew, and this is my speculation, but the reason Azem did not join in on one of the reasons Azem did not join in on whatchamacallit, in on calling Zodiac, and if you think back to Pandemonium, Azem was able to tell Elidibus that we would be coming to the past.
Yeah.
So chances are Hydaelyn roped Azem in on it, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna need you untempered in the future because I'm gonna do this shit. If things go south, and you need to be there to save everything, otherwise, our brethren are just gonna go down a very dark path and turn this into a life farm."
Just as a quick aside, the revelation that we are technically tempered by Hydaelyn was really, really cool.
Yeah.
Was it Kaio? I actually don't remember how to say your name. Also in chat saying, isn't Azem also sort of the traveler of the convocation? Makes sense that maybe she found a way not only to travel to the source, but also other reflections, other places, which would explain why the key has his or her symbol on it, either by Azem creating it or someone using his or her magic to do it.
Yeah. The reflections
But-
didn't exist during Azam's time, but that is true. His invocation did, which was known at least by well, there's the thing is that I don't know if it's a retcon
Right.
because Hitler Deus said that the crystal was done in secret.
The what
But
Azim's
it-
crystal.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it does contain specifically Azam's invocation to summon his friends. So either Emmet Selk knew this invocation and imbued the crystal with it,
Mm.
or like the other job crystals or the seat crystals, it has existed before and just passed along with the seat, in which case Emmet Selk didn't create it after his defection.
Mm.
So that's kind of blurry, I think, between Shadowbringers and
Right.
Endwalker.
Yeah, that made sense.
Yeah, potentially. There was I can't remember where I saw this, probably on Twitter as well. So we have the Azim's crystal, we have the key. Could it be possible that there are I hate using this word because it's such a dumb word, but MacGuffins on other reflections that work somewhat similarly? So we have the crystal, we have the key, and now there's like another piece of the puzzle, as it were.
Another Millennium item.
Yeah, literally. 100%. Another Millennium piece, like a pyramid or an eye. Not
Gather them
taking
all
too
to
much
unlock
from
the
you, yeah.
unlimited power.
I mean, yeah, we're in Final Fantasy. That specifically isn't out of the realm of
Sure.
possibility, but
We don't have crystals of light anymore. We have MacGuffins of travel.
MacGuffins of Azim. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Could it potentially be that
Sacred
these were
Woods of
all potentially made by Emmet Selk, distributed among the different reflections, whether he wanted to have them distributed or not? And then that's how we kind of merge with other reflections. That's kind of the impetus, or not the impetus, kind of the backdrop, somewhat story of it.
It is.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
It's Emmet Selk that in
Told us
Endwalker
to seek these
tells
things
us to
out.
go and do these things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you can read that in two ways. One is that one is that this is just a kind of narrative device that Emmet Selk is kind of just sort of teasing the player, and there's no plot in universe relevance to it. Or
Yeah.
you can read it as Emmet saying, hey, by the way,
I left gifts for you.
I knew that I was going to be tempered or something, so I left these things around to help you,
Mm.
or something like that, right? So I guess that that might be explained at some point too.
Yeah.
I hope there aren't too many objects like this. I have a feeling that the key works too, because it worked from the source to whatever shard Alexandria is.
Mm.
So I think because the Lalafels left from the source and came to Alexandria shard, whichever that is, and then it was used to open the gateway back. So
Yeah.
I have a feeling it is, or at least part of it is, source based, because it looks like there is a nugget of some sort in the center, and it's connected with wires to this construct.
Mm.
So whatever that piece is, I imagine is the power source of it. And I don't know, it kind of, the coloration is kind of similar to Azim's crystal. It's kind of goldeny thing. I don't know, maybe it's a prototype Azim crystal that didn't go right, and they just go, you know what, this is an
God.
invocation to cross borders.
Yeah, I mean, the possibilities are literally endless when it comes to
Yeah.
these with the Asians.
Yeah.
I mean, just to kind of round off the lore section of this podcast, because we've got a few other things I want to talk about. I personally would love it if Emmet Selk still exists in the story and is kind of pulling strings here and there, going on crazy adventures of his own across all reflections and trying to fuck with the other versions of us in these other reflections, and it all culminates in something massive. Just because it would be a real waste to have Emmet. So I don't want to say a waste, because a villain where you experience them for a story and then you dump them, for want of a better word, is always amazing, because it's like I will cherish that forever. But Emmet Stark is such a well written character that it would be a shame to not have him come back in some capacity later down the line.
I mean, to be fair, you wouldn't even need that. Knowing how smart Emmett Selk was, and him remembering that he left all these items, he could have just had a last minute fuck you and just hinted at these things that lead us to finding the portal to the 13th, which we did in the post patches, and then there are some interesting civilizations which leads them the key here. And maybe that leads us on a wild goose chase, which then triggers a series of events that might restart the rejoining process somehow, just in an alternative way. Just him going, oh, there's still one last like straw that I can use. One last lifeline to trigger this event. Just let them find these weird artifacts that will just fuck them over when they start using them without knowing what they do.
But the way I was thinking it was, you know, like, because we go when we're in Elpis, we tell Emmett Selk what's happened, and he claims not to believe it, right?
Yeah.
So I was sort of like, well, what, when I was thinking, oh, did he tell us to go off and find this stuff? It was like, is it because he somehow like sorted this prior to being Zodiac? I guess it doesn't make sense though, because he would like the Sundering came after the creation of Zodiac, so he would have had to have been tempered by that point.
Yeah. No, but he forgot seeing us. He didn't believe us initially, and then at the end of Thesis, he kind of hints that he's like, I don't admit believing in you, whatever you say, but don't squander the chance, or don't squander the chance that I leave you, or the legacy. So he's like, I believe you, I'm too proud to admit it. And then Kairos wipes all of that out, and he only remembers it when he dies, and the effects of Kairos got purged from death, basically.
True.
And so when he was summoned back, he's like, yeah, I feel like such a fucking idiot because I was warned, I did not remember, and I went down the very path that I said I would never do. I would not become megalomaniac, megalomaniacal madman, and then he went and did it because he couldn't remember.
Always the way.
Yeah.
Right. So like I said, we could talk about lore for this game until the cows come home, but this isn't just about the lore. This is about Dawntrail as an entire expansion. So the next thing I want to move on to, the thing that seems to be the most hotly contested, is the combat. The dungeons, the extremes. What are your thoughts on them? I'll start with Bear this time.
I'm loving it. I have to say, like, I guess when you say hotly contested, it's stuff like changes to jobs and that kind of thing. But I mean, Paladin's already had it. I've been playing Paladin, I should say. Paladin's already had its job change. I can debate the pros and cons of that, but the reality is that it was kind of the last job that hadn't been given a 2-minute cycle, so it didn't really fit with the other jobs. So they were bound to change it at some point. But I mean, I've been loving it. I've been loving the encounters. I've only done EX1 so far, but I think it's great. Like it's that perfect point of like, seems kind of a little bit difficult at first, but then you kind of get used to it and you get a sense of being able to do it in a way that doesn't feel overly frustrating. Like the mechanics don't feel like, why did I get hit by that? This is annoying. I'm annoyed by this fight. Like it so far is bangers as far as I'm concerned. There's literally one fight. I mean, they're not all like incredible. There's one fight which I find annoying in Dawntrail, which is the first boss of the EX dungeon in the haunted theme park with the cats.
I don't think anybody likes that.
I just feel I feel like they have used not being able to play the game as a punishment for messing up a mechanic before, and it wasn't fun then. I don't know why they brought it back. Like, nobody likes not being able to do anything for 10 seconds. Whatever. It's one boss in the entire expansion that I think is I say a stinker, but which isn't at
Yeah.
least good. So I've been loving it personally, but I haven't played any of the new stuff. I haven't played Viper. I haven't really. Well, I unlocked Viper and Pictomancer, and this is one thing, I guess. Sorry for a little digression. I think that the game, if it's going to give you a job and start you at level, what is it, 80?
Yeah.
It needs to have a better tutorial for how to play these new jobs, I think. It just, it gives you all these buttons because, I appreciate the people who do, give you some notion of the YouTube videos or whatever, some notion of how the rotation works, how the job mechanics work, etc. But like, your experience as a player is to just have your hotbar dumped in level up order of skills, and then a pop-up window which doesn't really explain very much about how it works. I mean, what I'm thinking of here, and I don't necessarily like drawing these comparisons all the time, is that World of Warcraft, when you has like tutorials for the different jobs that you don't even have to kind of well, I mean, this isn't strictly relevant to 14, I guess, because you don't even have to create the character, I don't think, in order to play the tutorial for the class. I think is how you remember it, is how I remember it. And there's a kind of,
Okay.
like an explanation of how the job works. Like, you're given a few of the abilities. It doesn't give you the entire thing, but it doesn't just dump all the buttons on you and say, figure this out, by the way, check YouTube if you're struggling. So I looked at these jobs for like 20 minutes and was just like, I haven't got a fucking clue how these work, and couldn't be bothered to figure it out in the moment, and didn't get very far with them. But
I think
what I have played has been great.
I think there
Can I
was.
jump in?
Hold on, just very, very quickly, because
Yeah.
I think Yoshi actually made this point. For some reason, I remember it. I don't know if I'm just making this up, but he didn't want to include something that teaches you too much, because he wants you to experience the game and talk to people in your FC, in your friends list, link shells, or whatever, and then learn the game that way. Because if you just shove a tutorial in for every class, while it makes it easier initially, that isn't still going to teach you how to play the character or the job at endgame. And that's really where everything matters the most. And if you have a tutorial for this is the rotation that we give you, because this is optimal that we have figured out from developing it, it's even less community. There's even less community involvement because they just give it to you. And I think that while I would agree to some degree that there needs to be a bit more of an introduction to these jobs, I think more of a cinematic, more flavorful introduction rather than giving you a tutorial might be quite good, a bit more engaging.
When I say tutorial, I don't necessarily mean like, it tells you what the rotation, what your optimal rotation is or anything. I just mean, like, so when you level up a job from level 1, you kind of get this experience almost, right? Because the jobs that start at level 1, as you unlock abilities, it's fairly intuitive, if not what your optimal rotation is, at least like what your rotation is in as a scaffold, right? With the new jobs, you don't get that at all, because you just get everything dumped on there. Yeah, you can, obviously you can read the tooltips, you can read the traits, you can understand how everything fits together with a lot of reading, and yeah, you can ask people, which I think is good. I think that I don't want to devalue the community and asking people and talking to people aspect,
Right,
but
yeah.
some more guidance than reading tooltips. Somewhere between
Yeah.
reading tooltips and having the optimal rotation taught to you until you can do it in your sleep would be I think would be good. I think would be I mean, it's a very minor thing as well, right? Like, I'm not saying these jobs are terrible because I read the tooltips for 20 minutes and I couldn't figure it out.
No, I
This
get
is
you. I
just
get you.
kind of like, it's a kind of minor frustration that you even get like teleport and sprint and the in-game help button appear on your toolbar the first time you quit these jobs. Like,
Yeah.
really? Why? Like, but yeah,
Did you do the job quests?
I
Did you even
I
start
did
them?
the introductory ones, but they were very much like, yeah. Do you mean the role quests or the job quests?
No, the job quests.
No, because I unlocked them and I haven't leveled them at all.
Right. Jumping in on Bear's answer, jumping on his neck. I'm not sure about Viper, but Pictomancer actually has a tutorial baked into the job quest.
Oh, okay.
They literally
Well,
take
there
you
you
to
go.
an instance going, so like you can't use anything they haven't taught you yet. Like first it's like, well, here's your 1-2-3 combo. This is how it works. Here's a few mobs, test it out. Here's an AoE version and then a regular one. Here's your motifs. You can't touch anything else because we haven't touched upon them yet. Here's how they work. And this is kind of the role. And yeah, they go through the different parts of the job, like very basic touches, like these have a long cast. You can prepare them beforehand and they do big booms when you use them. Here's your 1-2-3 combo, and here's your AoE rotation. Like, this is what these buttons they basically do, and then how to best weave them together, that's up to you. But these are the moving parts of the class, and that's like the first quest after getting your stone, I think.
Yeah.
There
So
you go.
Viper
Chatting
does
shit.
have that, but I don't know. It was good as like this is kind of how your job works, but to me,
Yeah, but
it felt like a bit of a waste of time. I don't. It didn't seem to hit the spot of that thing in between a full-blown tutorial and just like a flavor cinematic that says this is what the class does, like an introduction. But yeah, maybe that's just
I,
me.
I left it as a hands-on. Here's a new class. Here's a new toy. Here are the basic functions that it has. We'll leave figuring this shit out on you, but this saves you the time of reading the tooltips on what it does, and we let you give it a hands-on try in a sort of structured environment while weaving in a little bit of story to boot.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
have to do that because I unlocked the job and then I teleported to our free company place and started hitting a dummy and didn't even
Yeah.
because I guess I assumed that anything else I was going to do was going to ask me to do something I didn't know, which was which buttons I need to press.
Yeah, no, it was a
Yeah.
very
yeah.
bare bones introduction to these are the parts of the Pictomancer class, and here are roughly how they will work.
No, I'll check that out then.
Yeah,
And
I
just
liked
to
it.
just to clarify for me saying hotly contested, it is job changes and stuff, but I think also there are already have been people complaining about the difficulty of the dungeons specifically. Yeah, I mean, I don't think a lot of people that we hang around with are that bothered because we're not idiots, but there have been some posts on forums where people are like, these are too hard, you need to go back to how it was before. And I pray to all of the 12 that they do not revert anything. Like, change a few things here and there to make them a bit less frustrating, because that that never equals difficult, but difficulty is good. And I said this before, I'm not going to go fully into it, but the more difficult you make the introductory things, the better your player base gets. The more difficult you can make the later things because they're better at the game. And I think we probably have this problem now because people haven't been challenged even in the expert dungeons, where you have to actually use your positionals properly in True North and keep uptime.
Healers have to heal.
Healers have to heal, especially in the extremes as well. Like, just keep it going, Yoshi. You're on the right path.
Yeah.
I mean, my experience with the dungeons, I don't know about you guys, was that I think for the first time through any of the MSQs, I guess I did die on some of the bosses, but I think I died more times first time through on the dungeon bosses and certainly on the EXs than I can remember on previous ones. Or not died because I'm playing a tank; they're basically unkillable. But you know,
Yeah.
had more party
You'd be
wipes.
surprised.
Uh, but I think that's a good thing. Like you know, like I first time through a dungeon. You know, I know you see these horror stories on Reddit or whatever of like, you know, it was our first time in the dungeon and the tank left after the second pull of the second boss or whatever. But like, I don't care if the first time through it takes us 5 attempts to do one of the X's. Like you know, I enjoy that. Like I want that experience rather than it just being a glorified cutscene. Because eventually it's going to become a glorified cutscene anyway, right? Like once we
Yeah.
outlevel this stuff,
Yeah,
it's not going to be a
exactly.
challenge anymore. I'd rather die a bunch of times now and have a good time and it be a challenge and feel pushed.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
like the dungeon stuff is, you know, these bosses are only hard once, twice. They're not hard once you've done
yeah.
them and once you know the mechanics. They're not tough, right?
Yeah. Unless you expect to be carried and no brain it. And but
Yeah, sure.
I've really liked the dungeons. From what I've heard from other podcasts, I think the first one got nerfed during Media Tour.
Yes. So
Um,
the dungeon that they did with what was it? I don't know how you pronounce it, but yeah, basically the first dungeon of Dawntrail.
yeah,
They nerfed the end boss because you had two of the kind of wind tornado things that shot
yeah. From
out.
what I understood,
Yeah, and
yeah,
then there was another couple of things as well. It was too difficult even for people doing media tour. So, you know.
yeah. I mean, I can get it that depending, of course, how they move. Those 2-star AOE's bouncing around the arena and you trying to guess where the safe spot is going to be,
Yeah.
that's going to be a bit of a bother for a level 91 dungeon. Like, I don't know, maybe put that in an extreme or something, sure, but on a
Yeah,
leveling
definitely.
dungeon that you're supposed to be able to do with brainless NPCs, huh?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think like, yeah, I think there's always a bit of you know, like I don't want to kind of be like, if this is too difficult, you just need to get good or whatever. But I also do feel like these dungeons are not at a place where um they're extraordinarily difficult, and I feel like it's that place where you know, it's a kind of very light Dark Souls kind of thing where like you know, if you find this difficult, then hopefully you'll feel satisfaction when you beat them in a way that you won't if all these are very easy and you never struggle with them at all, right? Like
I think they should offer, and at least for the first times that you run them, at least for me, they offer that light level of challenge when you go, oh, you're throwing this much stuff at us in a
mm,
dungeon, but not overly difficult. I also liked how most of the dungeons did not have loading screens. I'm not sure if you
Yes.
noticed it,
That's
but
really, really cool.
several points. It's already in the first dungeon when you stop the river ride and you're going into the caves. I was like, it felt wrong running through that doorway and not being hit with a black screen. I was like, what? It just continues. That like my every instinct screams that there should be a loading screen here, and we move
mm,
into the interior, but there wasn't. I was so pleased, and sure, a few of the I think the last ones have, but I understand why, because it is a massive complex and we're moving between ground floor and 11th floor or something. And if you had all 11 floors in the dungeon, that would be a bit too long for their package, their dungeon package. So
Yeah.
yeah, where it is applicable, sure. But the other dungeons, I was so happy to see no loading screens and you can just run it straight.
It is such a relief now. You're not running into a series of blue dotted lines to change areas. It's so cool.
Yes.
And there's I don't think there's a single elevator flight in this expansion
There
either.
is.
So that's good too.
Two.
There is one
Two
elevator fight.
elevators.
Is there?
Yeah,
I can't
there's
remember
there's an elevator
fight.
boss in the Origenesis.
Oh, elevator bosses. I mean, a thing where you go into a loading screen and then you're stuck on an elevator and you fight like 5 waves of mobs and then you go
Yeah,
to
no.
another loading screen.
Yeah,
there's none of
no.
that.
Yeah, no, none of those. It's an elevator boss that you run straight to. I don't think there's an even loading screen before that.
Yeah.
There's a small one because you're changing areas, but yeah, nothing like a proper full loading screen to load a whole ass area.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And yeah, I found the extremes. The second one maybe I like more than the first one. They're both good, but the second one is way busier as far as mechanics go, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Well,
How have
extremes
you
was. Oh, go on.
I was gonna say, are you playing Pictomancer or Black Mage?
Pictomancer,
Pictomancer.
which
Because
I
I'd
feel
heard
is
from
relatively
people
close
say
to Black
that these
Mage.
fights are very tricky on Black Mage, and I was wondering if you'd.
Well,
done
I mean,
anything
Pictomancer still has its 3-second casts as
Right.
well, so it's not like we have too much time to move around without losing DPS. I feel like Pictomancer is really a modernized Black Mage, but that's just me.
Mhm.
I haven't run them on a Black Mage yet. I probably should. Maybe next raid. Just to pay Zizu off.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. Enjoyed them. There's parts where you have to do a lot and then parts where you have to do a little less, but all in all, way better than Zodiac or Heidelin.
Well, yeah, I think this is. I said this before, but I'll say it again. This is why people are generally praising these new extremes. It's because they do what Thordan did, and they do what T9 did, and they do what Shinryu did, where they throw mechanics at you and you gotta solve them. And that is what this game does best.
Mm.
Like, there's definitely, obviously, keeping up DPS is super important as well, but understanding where to stand, where to mitigate, where to pop self heals like Second Wind and Bloodbath, where you can pop True North, where you don't have to. All of that stuff it does exist in other fights, but when you have just a barrage of shit being thrown at you, it's a lot harder to do, especially for the first few times when you're trying to learn them. And I hope they keep it up. Just keep throwing things and keep throwing new things at us as well. Like, there's something that springs to mind is Valigamunda's the tank tower buster. It kind of in the beginning of the fight. Yeah, it's such a
I literally was about to say that because me and Tomo were saying yesterday, it's not just like a cool mechanic; it feels really satisfying to do as a tank.
Yeah,
because you actually feel as though you are tanking the hit and like
definitely.
protecting the party, whereas every other tank buster I can think of, and I haven't raided in the game forever, so I don't know if this is true. It just feels like a tank buster is like mitigate and tank swap, right? Whereas this actually is like you have to basically use a bunch of mitigations because it's so spread out. But then also, if you don't do it, then the whole party wipes, and that's like
it actually gives you responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. That's like really satisfying because that's like the tank fantasy, right? Like,
yeah,
it's kind of funny. Like I was thinking about this today, is that it's kind of funny to me that so many people claim that they're scared of tanking because it's like, like most of the time when you wipe it, it's because anyone messes up a mechanic or because too much damage goes out and the healer doesn't heal it quickly enough. Like you rarely die as the tank because you mess up, right? Like or people rarely die because you mess up as the tank, unless you do a mechanic wrong, which is how everyone dies, right?
True.
It doesn't matter who messes up. So, it feels nice. It feels like they really nailed that tank fantasy with that tank buster, and I hope that there's more stuff like that going forward. Of like,
and I think it's a dot as well in that. in that it requires attention of the healers as well. Like it
Yeah,
employs both
exactly.
healers and the tank more than tank busters usually do. It's not just a big blast and then the healer heals off. It's they have to keep pumping their heals on you to keep you alive so that you can actually take the tank buster.
Definitely. And
Yeah,
then just
more of those, please, Yoshi P.
and then just to kind of round that out, in EX2, there's a bunch of phases where there are things that are always similar, like sharing damage. But the way they do it in EX2 is unique from what I can remember, where you have to stand in what the strat is called conga. Basically, the two tanks take it, and then melee 1, I think it's melee 2, range 1, range 2, healers, or whatever. It's a new take on an old type of mechanic, which is really, really cool to see.
A staggered share.
Yeah, staggered share, but with like 6 people in the party, which is cool.
Yeah.
Like it gives everyone responsibility for a mechanic rather than it just being a tank buster, which I think is kind of the core of what they've always tried to achieve, but have again tried to give tanks more mechanics and then give melee or range more mechanics and then healers more mechanics, where if you just make the entire fucking fight and everyone mechanic, they can solve them individually, but you still need to work as a team. If you have a tank buster that has a little cone of safety, the tanks have that responsibility and everybody else has to make sure they're in the cone. And then the healers have to make sure they heal it up. That's a perfect example of a really cool mechanic.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, like I said at the way back at the beginning, like, you know, all of my misgivings about the MSQ are like basically balanced off against the fact that I think that the game portion of the thing, if you want to call it that, is
combat
like
stuff
as strong as I can remember it being, right? Like,
so for you, the visual novel was a bit so-so, but the actual gameplay is
visual novel.
Well, that's how I've come to, like, I don't even take Final Fantasy XIV story as questing anymore, because as a questing experience, it's terrible. It's because, you know, so my attitude towards it is it's a visual novel, kinda. It is very much an RPG where you follow the story, and then the gameplay side, like it's broken up by pieces of gameplay, whereas the MMO side comes afterwards and is elsewhere.
Yeah.
So that way, like, I like the story aspect of it and don't think of it as questing, because I recognize as questing it is terrible. But I like the story for the story, and I'm in it for the ride, so that I can then enjoy the actual game later on.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, separate the two. That's how I can kind of get on board with and go, oh yeah, I really like it, when I just throw out the game aspect for now and just I'm in it for the ride, and I'll enjoy the game afterwards.
Right, last two things. The next thing is just a small thing from me. Yoshi, the launch has been incredible. Whatever you did to the servers, whatever money you paid to the people who provide your servers, keep doing it on every expansion launch. It has been flawless, particularly for EU. But please just unlock travel for us in Europe. I don't want to keep going to Shadow to have to party find with my own static, some of whom are on light, some of whom are on chaos, some of whom are on shadow. Just let us travel between the two bigger ones, and I don't want to have to go to this dead server. It's a minor inconvenience, I understand, and it shouldn't be something I complain about, but you can lift the restrictions now. Keep the instances, because, you know, the instances still die when you have a hunt train or a big fate, but just unlock some travel. Anyway, last final thing I want to talk about is, yes, for me only, nobody else. I'm the only one who can data set travel. Last thing is the aesthetics of basically the graphics update. So the gear, the characters, the environments. I just want to ask what your favorite zone is at the moment, and why is that your favorite zone? I'll start with Rhel.
A favorite zone?
Yes.
Wow, that's difficult. I can't really say.
You have to pick one, Rhel. You have to have a strong opinion about this, otherwise nobody on the internet takes you seriously.
Wow. Well, that's why I don't do the internet.
True.
All of the zones kind of have something, but I guess I will have to go with damn it, what's its name? The one where the Mamulja and the kitties live. Yaktel.
Yaktel, yes.
Yeah. I probably like that the most. The jungle.
That rat I heard in the background.
Yes, he was shouting the zone name to me.
Okay.
But yeah, the jungle and the luscious green upstairs contrasted with the permanent night in the meteor crater. I think that is probably my favorite zone.
Okay,
Absolutely.
and before I move on to you, Bear, just to have an even stronger opinion about things, so that you can argue with everyone. What's your favorite piece of music in the new expansion? Which zone?
Quite honestly, I don't remember them. No, Tuli Yolal. Tuli Yolal is so different. At least to me, so different than anything else. Like every time I zone in, I expect some Hildebrandy action bullshit scene to be going on. Like
You don't
it
expect you
feels
crossed
like
over.
it feels like I'm jumping in on a Hildebrand quest whenever I zone in. That music just takes me by surprise every time. That is the most memorable music of this expansion for me.
Fair, fair.
The others are good, but that one always hits me.
And you, Bear, favorite zone, and then favorite piece of music in the zones.
So my favorite zone is a tie. I think, is that allowed?
No, you have to pick one.
Okay. Well, it's Shalawani and Okapacha,
Okay, so Shallow
but
Annie,
that's
because
not
it was your
tied.
first one.
They're joined together as an and, so it's not tied.
Oh, I see. So they're just one big zone. Okay.
One big zone. Yeah. Um. Yeah. I just think that I think they both look really cool. I like the. I feel like maybe Shalawani is a bit closer to some of the zones we've had before, but Okapacha feels like a bit more novel to me as an area. Like I feel like we've not really had that sort of that particular kind of alpine zone,
Yeah.
where it's kind of mountainous, but also there are. I guess it's a little bit like the one in Stormblood, but it's more mountainous than that, right? What's the one in the big open zone in Stormblood?
Azim Step.
Azim Step. Like it's kind of like Azim Step, but it's got a lot more verticality, which I really like about it. And I think that the skybox looks incredible. Like it's the most amazing skybox they've made so far, where you can, see stuff off in the distance that looks amazing. Also, like as an aside, I don't know if any of you guys have explored any of the old zones, but like I was looking, when I started replaying Heavensward, the cloudy land, whatever the hell it's called,
Sea of
looks
Clouds?
amazing now with the new lighting. Like it doesn't have that kind of slightly washed out look it used to have. It looks a lot more vibrant now. So if you haven't checked out the old zones, I recommend
mean
you
Sea
do
of
that. They look
Clouds?
amazing. And favorite music is the Shalawani Day theme. It's literally the only time I've grinded
Right.
Fate to maximum level so that I could buy it. I think it's sick with the guitar. Again, it's pretty different, I think, to most other stuff they've done in the games so far musically. And it's really good. I have it playing on my orchestral in my house already. I also like the night theme. I think the night theme is good, but I think it's been slightly pipped by the day version of the music.
Okay, nice. Well, thank you for giving me your opinions. I'm not going to give mine because I just wanted you to put yourselves out there and I will be safe. Thank you everybody for watching. That will be the end of SOULScast number 4. What do you think of Dawntrail? We'll be back next week. I'm considering changing it to a Wednesday because I understand that Friday evenings might be a bit awkward for some people, going out and stuff. So maybe it'll be Wednesday. It says in between raid day, in the middle of the week. I'll think about it. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching. Thank you to everybody in chat for taking part. Always nice to have some conversation off to the side to have a little read through. That will be goodbye from Rhel.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from TwoBear.
Goodbye.
And that will be goodbye from me. I won't be continuing stream. I'll be doing some EX2 farming off stream, but I will see you tomorrow for some more Final Fantasy XIV. Take care, stay safe, and have a good night.